First thing you're going to want to do is loosen the top of the strut mount bolts with a 12mm socket. Okay, so first thing you're going to want to do once you take the wheels off is disconnect, take the brake lines separated from the strut, which is with this bolt, and there was a bolt in right here, but I took it out already. Then be sure that you don't lose these clips. It just comes off like that. And when you do dismount this, be sure that the brake line doesn't get caught on it, or you could rip it off and have a big problem. Alright, so now that you have everything unbolted down here, you're going to want to completely take off these upper bolts here, and either have someone or yourself hold this so it doesn't just completely hold the strut so it doesn't completely just drop down. Okay, so now that you got the strut assembly out, first thing you're going to want to do is compress the spring. I would highly recommend using a spring compressor rather than somebody just pushing the spring down. Next thing you do is take the top hat off the strut. There's a bolt in there that you need to unscrew. You may end up having to put an Allen wrench into the strut into here to keep the strut from spinning in the assembly itself. Okay, next, in order to remove the old bump stop and replace it with the RCE provided front bump stop, you're going to need to, at the bottom of the strut, remove that nut there. Use an impact wrench, because if you don't, you could start spinning the shaft with the impact wrench. Since it's a real quick hit of force, it isn't as likely to spin the shaft. Okay, so now that you took that lower nut off of the strut, you're going to pull it out of the housing, and there's the stock bump stop. You can see that it's much longer than the RCE supplied bump stop. What you're going to want to do is pull this bump stop off and replace it with the new RCE supplied bump stop. This will give you a much better ride and handling. With the RCE bump stop, when you put it on, make sure the pointier end is pointing up towards the strut. Once you push that fully on, you're going to want to reinsert the strut into the housing. The bump stop may or may not slide up a little. That's okay, because it'll all fall in place once you drive. Alright, so now you're going to want to put that, now that you inserted the strut back into the housing with the new RCE bump stop, you're going to want to put that nut back on and torque it down to about 30 foot-pounds. Okay, so the next thing you do is you want to put the dust protector on, and then you put the spring on. Make sure that the spring, the bottom where it cuts off, is seated in here. There's sort of a little notch. Make sure that the end of the spring is seated in that notch. This will prevent the spring from moving around in the perch. If you do, you could get a coil bind and some unpleasant noises. Okay, once you get the spring on, you're going to want to compress it so that you can, you're also going to want to compress the spring so you can get the top hat and camber plate on. So once you get the spring compressed, you're going to want to put on this metal top hat. Make sure that those 3 holes, the farthest out hole, is pointing outwards of the vehicle. To put on the Race Comp Engineering camber plate, first thing you're going to want to do is put back on the original conical washer. Next, you're going to put on the Race Comp Engineering spacer. It's this spacer. Make sure it goes on in that direction. Next, you put Next you put the Race Comp Engineering camber plate on. It's really, I've tried a couple of camber plates. It's the best camber plate I have tried and seen. The bearing in it is just of quality that you won't find anywhere else. Okay, so reinstall the strut. It is very helpful to have two people. First thing you're going to want to do is line up the camber plate with the strut top holes and loosely put the nuts on. After that, you're going to want to put back in the camber bolt and the lower strut bolt. And then after that, you're going to want to reattach the brake lines. The pound-foot torque spec for the brake lines is 23 pounds. For the camber and lower strut bolt, it's 114 pounds. And for the upper strut mounts, it's 14 pounds. And for the strut bolt itself, that one, the torque spec is 40 pounds. Alright, so now going on to the rear to install the rear springs. What you're going to want to do is take off this nut and remove this bolt, and there's another one below it, just like the front lower strut mounts. I had a lot of trouble getting these bolts off, so I highly suggest soaking them overnight with some kind of a penetrant like PB Blaster or WD-40 or something like that. Okay, so now that you took those bottom strut bolts out, you're going to want to unclip the brake line. It's only attached by a clip. You want to sort of pry it out with a flathead screw. Okay, now you're going to want to undo the 3 top strut mount bolts that are located here. You need to remove the rear seat to get to them. I also, for ease of getting to that bolt, I took off the rear seat belt inertia wheel. Okay, so now once you have the strut assembly off the car, you're going to want to do the same as the front and compress the springs so you can take the top hat off. Okay, so now that you have the spring compressed, you're going to want to take off the top strut nut. Now, I use an impact wrench to do it, or you can use a open-ended socket and put an Allen key in here to keep the strut from spinning. Okay, now that you have everything disassembled, you're going to want to put the RCE spring on, and again make sure that the cut end of the spring is in the little notch in the base to prevent coil bind and unpleasant noises. Okay, so once you put the RCE spring on, you're going to want to put the upper strut mount back on, and then at that point you're going to reinstall it back into the car the same way it came off.